Sir, we are live now. उधर का शुरू है। ఇద్దరిది అందరికి కొంచెం టైం చేస్తారు ఇప్పటికీ అదే అనుకుంటున్నాను వాళ్ళిద్దరూ మంచి
Vani madam, you unmute.
Yeah, a warm and hearty welcome to our esteemed, accomplished HOD, Professor Rajendra Prasad, Engineers League of Faculty, and cheerful, smart, and astute VGITians of Civil, Mechanical, Electronics and Communications Engineering, and our resource person, Dr. Soumya Sharma, to yet another scintillating session of our 5-day induction program. A joyful morning to all of you. Dear students, I hope the previous session has infused hope and excitement to venture into your chosen field of education. Well, today's resource person, Dr. Saumya Sharma, is going to give us a vivid description of what it takes to emerge as a winner in our professional life. I expect our students to understand the purpose of life and self-exploration. I, Srivani, from the Department of English, take the privilege of introducing Dr. Saumya Sharma, who is an assistant professor in linguistics department at the English and Foreign Languages University, Lucknow campus, and has been a guest faculty at IIT Kanpur for a year, where she taught a course on communication skills and composition. Her doctoral research was on discourse analysis of drama. She has presented papers in many international conferences and has published articles in discourse analysis, gender studies, language teaching, and critical pedagogy. She has published 3 books till date, namely Common Errors in Everyday English, Oxford University Press 2017, Language, Gender and Ideology, Constructions of Femininity for Marriage, Routledge, UK 2018, Discourse and Psychology, and Introduction, Routledge, UK 2020. I invite and request our speaker, Dr. Soumya Sharma, to share her invaluable and significant inputs. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Soumya, and thank you, Srivani ma'am, for this warm welcome. I welcome all the students. May you have a very interesting and a very informative time during the induction program. And hope you all learn some nuggets from the different resource persons and the different presentations and activities that have been organized for you all. Today, I'm going to speak to you all about something that is quite dear to me, which is the topic of emotion and mindfulness in our personal and professional life, and how we can emerge winners by being mindful and by being conscious of our emotional states. I hope that this is going to be a slightly interactive session. So to begin with, I would like to ask the students or the people present here, is there anyone who knows something about emotions or about emotional intelligence? Anyone? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, yes. So I was just wondering, all right. So, okay. So I will talk about emotions to you all. Uh, I am thinking that, this might be, I was informed that, the students that I'm speaking to, the people, the audience that I'm speaking to, belong to a batch of engineering, the engineering program, right? Civil engineering or mechanical engineering. And I am sure as prospective engineers, somebody who's come into the field of engineering with the idea that you would study the physical sciences or the life sciences, as we say, right? Many of you till your class, there seems to be a little bit of a disturbance, ma'am, Shivani ma'am. So I was saying that many of you who've come to the field of engineering with the idea that you're going to study the life sciences or the physical sciences, mm, and I'm sure in your 10th and your plus 2 um, study duration, you would have focused more on the science subjects. So there are very few students normally, when they are studying science, a large majority of students would not focus on languages or literature, because obviously they become relatively a little less important for their competitive exams and for their admissions, for securing a seat. uh, so the point that I'm trying to make is that when we talk about emotion, when we talk about being a winner in a particular field, right? Uh, Obviously, we talk about something which is known as intelligence. Okay. And the concept of intelligence per se, ironically, originated in the field of psychology, right? Uh, the concept of intelligence was defined by various psychologists in different ways. And these psychologists felt that, some of them obviously felt, commonly so, that intelligence was the way students performed in their classes, the way they scored in their tests and examinations, right? But there were others who felt that intelligence was not limited to academics, competitive exams, and studies. Intelligence was a bigger thing. Intelligence was something that was required for the all around or the holistic development of the person. And so, even though the concept of intelligence started off by being associated with academic intelligence, yet the concept was developed further. And researchers actually talked about many types of intelligences. So, we had a very famous researcher in psychology by the name of Gardner. And he talked about the concept of multiple intelligences. And according to him, multiple intelligences were They were the intelligence or the ability or the capacity required to perform different tasks, to excel in different fields, right? And all of us as human beings possessed these intelligences in varying degrees. So, Gardner had discussed uh, the different types, like, for example, musical intelligence, the intelligence required to play musical instruments. Some of us have seen people who are, drawn more to music. They tend to play the instruments like a guitar, a piano, a violin very well, right? Some are able to do it with practice. Some are innately born with that ability, that they have a ear for music, right? Uh, like musical intelligence, we also have visual intelligence. Visual intelligence is the ability to see, the ability to understand simple symbols, icons, graphics, okay? The ability to harmonize and look at colors, to look at shapes. Okay. Similarly, we have kinetic intelligence, the intelligence related to body movement and posture. Right. Obviously, academic intelligence was a type that was included, the ability to be proficient in one's area of study. But apart from this, we also had something which was not commonly discussed, but within a few decades of Gardner talking about intelligence, uh, this was known as emotional intelligence, or what we call as EQ. Now, when Gardner discussed his concepts, they were, in the 60s, in the 70s, you can say. About a few decades later, emotional intelligence has become a big word, a big catchword, so to say, right? And even though at that point of time, 30, 40 years ago, people assumed that if people had academic intelligence, if they had an ear for music, right? If they had some kind of interpersonal intelligence, that is the ability to interact with people broadly, okay? They obviously were competent enough to handle their emotions. They obviously were competent enough to recognize their emotions, right? And to deal with life situations. But uh, this was not really the case, because research over the years has shown and proven that emotional intelligence, even though it comes from interpersonal skills, okay, or you can say the ability to understand interpersonal interaction and to engage with people interpersonally, even then emotional intelligence is very, very specific. Fine. Emotional intelligence is specific in the sense that it deals with, you can say, three particular components that are very important, right? And when we talk about emotion as a category, when we talk about our feelings, you can say, no, or we can use a more technical term when we talk about affect, our feelings, likes, dislikes, emotions all together, okay, as a category. We talk about having proficiency in dealing with those emotions, feelings, likes, and dislikes. And that is why the term emotional intelligence over the past few decades has become so important. Now, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence has broadly three aspects to it. The first is the aspect of recognizing our own emotions, which is quite tough. Okay. The second is, and I'll explain why it's quite tough shortly. The second is the ability to recognize and label other people's emotional states, what they are experiencing. This can be verbal, this can be subverbal. That is, we can communicate through words and we may not communicate through words at all. The third aspect is using the first two abilities, the ability to understand our emotions and the ability to understand and recognize other people's emotions, using these two aspects effectively in communication or in interpersonal communication, like we would put it. So, emotional intelligence means that we have an awareness, a level of consciousness, so to say, uh, to understand what is happening in our inner lives. Now, when we talk about people being good at their work, when we talk about people being good at their professions, we obviously talk about people being role models, people being leaders, people having particular qualities that are appreciated by others. We talk about people who are able to inspire, people who are able to motivate others, right? And in all of this, the most important ability is knowing how to handle our own emotions and knowing how to recognize and deal with other people's emotions. In fact, you would find in scholarly journals and even in popular reviews, right? Right, like the Harvard Business Review, okay, which is read by hundreds of people who are pursuing their business administration. Not only that, it is read by lay people who are not in to the area of business administration but are interested in the latest developments in how an organization works, how group behavior works, how interpersonal behavior works. So, Harvard Business Review has many writers who've talked about emotional intelligence. And by and large, these writers say, and they kind of sum up, that emotional intelligence is one of the basic fundamental traits of being a leader. It is one of the basic fundamental traits of being extremely successful in life. And it is also one of the most fundamental traits, you can say, of understanding how to deal with ourselves and how to deal with others, right? Because, like we say, a very old proverb goes, charity begins at home. So here, home metaphorically can mean us, ourselves. So when we say charity begins at home, it begins with us. It begins with how we deal with our own selves. Now, if we put this to practical use, we can turn around and say something like this, that if you all are going to become engineers, right, in your academic life, in later on in your professional life, you will encounter many people. You will come across many situations where things might be pleasant, but they might not be pleasant. Things might be conflictual, they might be negative. In those situations, how is it that you're able to manage your emotions? How is it that you're able to manage and understand and deal with other people? Even things as simple as this. You all are living in the hostel. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with your own day to day relationships, like the new friendships you form? How do you deal with your relationship, uh, a formal relationship, such as maybe, with your seniors, with your teachers? How is it that you're able to deal with that? Because, as we all know, the academic field is a field where there is a lot of competition. And competition should always be healthy, but sometimes it is not healthy. And then, in such cases, what becomes very important is how is it that we are able to manage our own stress, our own problems? And how is it that we're able to help others? Because a very simple thing is that is, it's a common perception that we might say a lot of things. We might talk about a lot of things, but people will always remember us not only for what we say, but how we make them feel. So emotion becomes extremely, extremely important for our well-being. It becomes extremely important for the well-being of others in the environment. Another way of understanding this would be a very simple example and from our day-to-day lives. When you experience a particular emotional state, what actually happens to your body? Have you ever noticed that? When you experience a particular emotional state, what happens to your body? How is it that your body interacts with your affect? How is it that your body interacts with your mind? Many a times we come across this where if you're angry or if you're agitated or if you're irritated about something or someone, your entire body will react to it. Not just the fact that you will experience a whirlpool of emotions, you will experience what is going on in your mind. There'll be multiple thoughts, right? The thoughts might be positive, they might be negative, right? But apart from that, our facial expression changes. For example, if we're angry, we will knit our eyebrows. We might grit our teeth. Okay. We might clench our fists. Okay. Similarly, if we are agitated, we might experience a sinking feeling. You know, we might experience that our heart is fluttering, palpitating very fast, beating very fast. So the point I'm trying to make is that in experiencing different emotional states, our body interacts with our emotions. Our body and our emotions are not separate. You can consider them, interwoven in our everyday existence. So obviously, when we face stressful situations in life, when we face competition, right, when we face negativity, how is it that we are able to deal with it not only at the emotional level but also at our bodily or cognitive level? And that is why the concept of emotional intelligence becomes extremely important. Extremely important. Emotional intelligence also means, like the way the word intelligence is used, emotional intelligence also means that we can, as human beings, develop it. Like we develop proficiency in particular academic areas, right? Like we have academic intelligence. Some students work very hard, they're very laborious. Other students might not work hard throughout the year, but they might work hard towards towards their examinations, towards their semester end examinations or their annual examinations, and they might score well. Still others might not work hard. They might have the ability to just read through the material and they would score well, right? So different individuals have different capacities. Right? Now, what this particularly means is that, like we can develop our academic intelligence, we can also develop our emotional intelligence, which basically means that, like we can teach somebody to become laborious and hardworking in their studies, we can actually teach ourselves how to become intelligent, okay, in reading other people's emotions, starting with our own. And one of the most important things when we talk about emotions or reading about emotions is when we talk about an aspect in emotional intelligence, which is known as empathy. Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand the other person's perspective. Okay. We normally say, again in psychology, that we have some 5, 6 basic emotions, right? We have the emotion of happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, right? Anxiety, right? And these emotions are universal. These emotions are experienced by people all over the world. These emotions are allowed to be displayed in different cultures in different ways. For example, in our own multilingual, multi-ethnic Indian culture, right? We have different ways of showing our happiness. Some people, you know, become very, very talkative when they are very happy. Some people emote through their entire body, you can say. That is, they will start having crinkly eyes. They will have wrinkles at the end of their eyes. They'll smile a lot. Okay. Some people have a habit of being very, very expressive. So if someone is very happy and they're very expressive, okay, they would tend to hold hands. They would tend to hug their loved ones. Okay. But in some other cultures, this kind of an emotional display is not allowed. Okay. For example, in the Japanese culture, we by and large say that the Japanese are a little restrained when it comes to emotional display. They look at emotions as a kind of, you can say, not a hindrance, but yes, a uh, situation, emotional situation to be dealt with. Okay, something that is not in tune with their social hierarchy, right? So the Japanese men and women are taught not to emote in particular ways. For example, not to be extremely happy and expressive in public, not to be extremely sad and tearful in public. For example, at the time of a funeral or at the time of somebody's death, okay, which is very different from our own culture. So emotions can be displayed and understood in various ways across cultures, across time periods, okay, and obviously they're seen differently in interpersonal interaction. But something that I had mentioned just about few minutes ago, I had mentioned that one of the most important ways, or one of the most, you can say, fundamental concepts in emotions is the concept of empathy. And empathy is not, like I just mentioned, one of the six basic emotions. It is not one of the six basic emotions. But empathy is the key to dealing with all these six basic emotions. That is, if we learn to be empathetic, if we understand the concept of empathy, we understand how we can be happy, how we can avoid anxiety, fear, anger, and how we can deal with disgust. So, the key to understanding emotional intelligence is the key to understanding empathy, right? And here I'd like to share a few slides with you and explain to you the concept of empathy. Okay. So, when we talk about empathy, we talk about these particular concepts. We talk about empathy in nature. We talk about animals that are empathetic. We talk about empathy in gender, and we talk about different gendering or socialization patterns. And then obviously we talk about empathy in our family and parenting styles. To understand, let's look at empathy in nature, right? How is it that in the environment, in our physical environment, the world that we have around us, are other creatures empathetic? And research obviously proves they are. For example, if you look at animals, the study of animal behavior comes under the area of ethnology, right? And ethnologists have proven and they've shown through their experiments and their research that different animals from different species are quite empathetic. They care for their fellow beings. They care for what is happening to others around them. For instance, okay, if you've ever seen monkeys, you would see how monkeys, the parent monkey looks after the child monkey. You would have seen that. You would have also seen how is it that if the child monkey passes away, right, the parent, the monkey who's the parent, would clutch onto the child's body for the longest period of time. They actually experience sadness. They actually experience grief. And that grief is visible. It's palpable. Right? Similarly, ethnologists have found that a particular species of bats, right, night creatures, are that are known as vampire bats and that feed on blood are highly evolved and altruistic in nature, in the sense that these bats live in caves in and around Mexico and South America. And these bats, it's been shown that, if a particular bat from their species is dying because of, lack of food for them means lack of blood. Okay, there will be other bats who will bring the blood, regurgitate it into the mouth of these bats, feed them so that they can live. That means these bats, even though they're night creatures, even though they are smaller, they're not as advanced as us, so to say. Okay, they don't have language, but yet they have emotions. They have empathy. They can understand what the other person is, other creature is feeling, right? So empathy is visible in the animal kingdom, or I should say, across the animal kingdom, right? Empathy is also not restricted to gender, though we say traditionally that men and women, again, gender research shows that men and women are brought up differently. They have different socialization patterns. They have different, ways of understanding the world. Yet, men and women are empathetic. They might be varying degrees of empathy, but they are empathetic. For example, in our own culture, it is implicitly assumed, okay, and it is normatively expected that women would react in particular ways and men would react in particular ways, right? And obviously, it is expected that women would sit, talk, and walk in particular ways. Same thing applies to men, right? But there is gender research, okay, by people like, let's say, Deborah Tannen, or gender research by people like Sandra Bartke, goes on to prove that, or even in the recent area where there's gender research that focuses on men, masculinity, okay, goes on to prove that men have a lot more, you can say, independence or freedom, right, in comparison to women. This is obviously a topic of debate because a lot of people might not think this is the case, right? So here I am not making a generalization, so to say. I'm not passing a sweeping statement, but I'm saying yes, there are degrees. There is this kind of the behavior, the speech, the actions of men and women differ, and they are relative to their context, relative to their environment. But yes, we do understand by and large that there are certain privileges that are given to women, there are certain privileges given to men. And obviously, uh, there is a certain sense of freedom, there is a certain sense of independence, which is a little more found in men as compared to women. Why? Because parents are often very scared for women's safeties. Where would they be? How can they stay up late at night? Where are they going? Etc. Etc. All those questions cross people's minds, right? So obviously, when this kind of a situation is there, can we talk about empathy? Can we talk about empathy in terms of gender? Yes, we can. It is traditionally understood that women are supposed to be the caregivers. They are supposed to be the people who are look after others. They're supposed to have a nurturing attitude. They're supposed to have feelings of care, protection, okay, and love for others, for other people's well-being and welfare, right? But again, this is not gender specific. Why? Because men can also experience the same states, the same emotional states, though they might, because of their cultural influences, because of the way they are brought up, because of what is expected from them, they might respond differently in society. But even though our gendering patterns socialize or bring us up in particular ways, we can, as men and women, right, learn to be empathetic. We can choose to respond in particular ways and not choose to respond in other ways. So obviously, yes, if empathy is not specific to gender, if empathy can be experienced by both the genders, so to say, or by the different types of genders, you could say, empathy then obviously can be learned. And a large contribution to an individual's understanding of empathy is from their family, from their way they are brought up by their family members, particularly by their parents, right? So this means that often the way our behaviors are reinforced by others, our behaviors are taught by others, what we understand and see of the world around us, that's the way we learn to behave, or that's the way we learn to emote, that's the way we learn to respond or react often, right? A simple example, a very simple example for this can be, when somebody comes to your house, as a little child or as somebody who's an adolescent, okay, isn't it the situation where our parents, whatever religion, caste we might be in, isn't it that parents and grandparents, okay, or people who are older to us in our family will tell us to greet them properly, right? To smile and to greet them. And isn't that behavior continuously reinforced when we have guests? Isn't that behavior a sort of subconscious learning for us? So if we can learn how to behave in public, thanks to, the way our elders in the family or the way other people in the family expect us to, or the way they implicitly teach us, can we not learn how to be empathetic? We can, right? Can we not learn how to be emotionally intelligent? We can. So empathy is obviously learned, and empathy, one of the most important influences on empathy is our family environment and our background, right? Now, obviously, a very important part of empathy is these particular emotions, so to say. Okay, empathy actually comes from the German word Inverlang, right, which means feeling into or understanding what the other person is experiencing. But there are these four aspects, okay, which are similar to empathy, but they're actually not same. And an understanding of this would explain how is it that we can develop emotional intelligence. So the first is sympathy, then compassion, then pity, and then contagion, right? So sympathy basically would mean you understand what the other person is feeling. You understand what the other person is feeling, all right? But it is just limited to understanding. It is just limited to understanding. For example, let's say there is a domestic help in your house who's experiencing some kind of personal trouble in their family, right? You understand what they're feeling. You're sympathetic towards them. You understand that they are troubled, right? Compassion is you understand what the other person is feeling, and so you're motivated to do something for them. Compassion springs from, yes, sympathy, from understanding what the other person's emotions are, but it also results or translates into action, doing something for others. Okay. Pity is just feeling sorry for the other person. It often does not involve actions. Okay. And contagion is something totally different. Contagion is experiencing emotional states as part of a group. And here I'd give you the example of, I'll give you two examples, something that we call as herd mentality. Okay. The first example is from the animal kingdom again. It comes from a species of animals. Okay. They are known as lemmings. Lemmings, right? And lemmings have this particular contagion where they experience suicidal behavior. So if some lemmings jump off a cliff, the other lemmings mindlessly, heedlessly followed those few who had jumped off, least realizing where they're heading. And they also land up jumping off the cliff. So obviously they land up dying, right? Another way of experiencing contagion is through fear, in a group. in a mob. If a few people in a group or a mob experience fear, everybody else starts experiencing it. So contagion is contagious. A particular emotional state can be contagious. A positive example of this would be something like this. If in a particular room, two people are smiling and laughing, three people are smiling and laughing, the others also looking at them would, if not laugh, they would smile. So the atmosphere in the room becomes very light, right? But empathy is not all this. Empathy is basically, it is not just sympathy, not understanding. It's not limited to understanding. It is not limited to compassion, understanding and then doing something. Okay. It is definitely not contagion, and it is definitely not pity. So empathy is understanding the other person's mental state, whatever emotion they are experiencing. And also very important, understanding their perspective, understanding how and why they are feeling what they're feeling, how and why they're thinking what they are thinking, right? So empathy becomes important for developing and for understanding our emotions. Why? Because commonsensically, okay, look at it this way. If we are empathetic, we are able to recognize and accept our own emotions. First thing, we need to be empathetic to our own selves before being empathetic to others. Okay. So if you're empathetic, we are able to understand and recognize our own emotions. If we are empathetic, we are also able to recognize and understand the other person's emotions, which basically means if we are able to understand the emotional states of people, we would be able to understand why they are behaving and why they are reacting the way they are reacting. And so we would be able to understand their actions, and we can take concrete steps to maybe change that or nullify that, okay, or to explain something to them, right? Because very often this is something that we find in people who are not emotionally intelligent, people who are not able to deal with their emotions. They react, they do not respond. There's a difference between reaction and response. Reaction means that we are like a particular jukebox, okay, right? If you've seen a particular vending machine, you put some money into it, some coins into it, and you get something out of it, right? That is a reaction, a particular reaction, a particular response to a stimulus. That's a reaction. Somebody says something to you, somebody does something to you, you react to that. Response is not that. Response comes from emotional intelligence. Somebody says something to you or does something to you, but yes, you pause, you think about it, and then you respond. So you choose to respond, but you just react. That's the difference. You choose to respond, but you just react. That's the basic difference between the two, right? And if we're empathetic, we would choose to respond. If we have emotional intelligence, we would choose to respond. We would not choose to react, right? So obviously now, before I talk about the other concept, mindfulness, I'd like to share some particular nuggets with you, on empathy and how to, let's say, develop it, so to say. Okay. So the first thing is, before I share what is how to develop it, let's look at some kinds of non-empathetic behavior. Okay. Behaviors where you're not showing empathy, where you're not showing emotional intelligence. Okay. When people have prolonged arguments, when people form very rigid opinions about others, when we start blaming other people for mistakes without recognizing our role in it. Okay. Very often you find people holding grudges against people. You would find people who are, hold on to, metaphorically, you can say, thorns, right? People who would hold on to past memories that are not positive, that are negative, that are unpleasant, right? Okay. Empathy is not a very important thing. Please understand, it is not mind reading. Okay, you're not some uh, you're not some magician. You would not look at a person's face and just, understand their past, present, and future. It is not that. Empathy is trained, practiced responses to the environment, to people in the environment, to our own selves. Okay. So non-empathetic behavior is anything which evokes or which creates negativity, anything which creates problems, not just for you, but for the person who's experiencing it. Okay. There are two concepts more that are there in empathy, okay, that show that they are not empathetic. One is the concept of teamwork, group work, which becomes very common in academic life. Why? Because many a times, as students, as part of our peer group, we are given work to do, work which requires us to work in collaboration with others, which is not based on our individual performance solely. Then obviously we need to handle our emotions very well so that we can understand and deal with other people. Okay. So the question when we talk about group work or teamwork, or you can say nowadays a very important concept in teaching is called collaborative learning. Okay, is, can we work as on a group or can we not work on a group? And for this we would talk about two concepts that are very commonly understood by others. Are we introverts or are we extroverts? And does introversion and extroversion have anything to do with our emotions? Yes, they do, right? Introversion means when we are selective in our choice of friends, when we prefer being reserved, when we prefer having, you know, less company. Okay. Extroversion is the opposite. People who are extroverts are gregarious. Right? They like being the center of attention. They like having people around. They like emoting. They like expressing. They like talking. Right? And how is it that these behaviors, okay, these particular behavioral traits, these patterns are associated with our emotions, our emotional intelligence? They are associated in the sense that if it is commonly assumed that if you're an extrovert, okay, you would tend to handle other people's emotions better. If you're an introvert, you would not. Okay, why? Because you do not simply like company. You do not like being around people by and large, right? But this is really not the case. Okay, why? Because extroverts are exteriorized, introverts are interiorized. Often, for understanding emotions, for dealing with emotions, we need to have both these behavioral patterns with us. So, what I'm trying to say is that it is not an either or situation. It is not a situation that we are either introverts or extroverts. We need to be capable. We need to understand that we have both these components and are able to use them as and when the situation requires. So, for example, if we have to work in a team, if we have to work as part of, some kind of a collaborative activity, then obviously we would need skills where we can talk to others, where we can help others, where we can ask other people for help in a pleasant way, right? And there are periods where, for our own study, for our own, dealing with our own stress, okay, dealing with our own problems, we might need periods of seclusion, periods of solitude, where we are able to understand what we are feeling and why we are feeling that. This is similar to introversion, right? So, what I'm trying to say is that actually we are not just introverts and extroverts. We should all, if we want to become successful in life, we should actually be ambiverts. We should practice both. We should be able to be skillfully move from one to the other, right? And how is it that this is related to our emotional intelligence or to empathy? This is related in the sense that only when we're able to understand our own emotions, right, Can we help others? So we need periods of being an introvert to become proper extroverts. Similarly, we need extroversion. We need to deal with people so that we can understand how conflict works, how interpersonal interaction works, how and why people experience what they experience. So obviously, okay, empathy is a component and emotional intelligence is a component in both these patterns, behavioral patterns, right? The last point here is that when we're talking about emotions, whatever I've spoken about till now, okay, deals with healthy emotions or recognizing the unhealthy emotions, right, and dealing with them. It surely does not deal with psychopathic behavior. People who tend to manipulate. This is research given by Sarah Conrad, right. It started off way before the in 2010 2011, but it culminated in a research in 2013, right. And she goes on to prove that psychopaths or people who are, what we in psychology would say as abnormal, right, people who experience abnormality, are people who tend to manipulate others, people who believe in a transactional kind of a relationship, people who believe in a kind of give and take, that you do something for me and I'll do something for you in return. Okay. That is not being emotionally healthy. That is not being empathetic. And that is surely not being emotionally intelligent, right? Because many a times, if we are emotionally intelligent, many a times we should be able to recognize and understand why people behave the way they behave, right? And not actually manipulate their emotions and not have a symbiotic relationship solely. Being emotionally intelligent means we sometimes transcend our own emotions to help others. Okay. We sometimes do not look at our own problems, but we do things for others which would make them happy. So this is clearly not empathy and this is clearly not emotional intelligence. So how is it that we can actually develop emotional intelligence? Now that we've looked at what is not empathy and what is not emotional intelligence. Okay. Okay. Science goes on to prove 2 points that I'd like to tell you here. Okay. Science goes on to prove that obviously learning emotions, learning our behavior, how to respond uh, in healthy ways to others, okay, is got to deal with the brain. For example, there's research by Singer et al. These are neuroscientists who've proven that, if we keep two people, partners, let's say, or spouses, okay, and one of the partners is given a stimulation of pain, the other one will also experience it, even though they're not given the pain stimulation. Why? Because they have a lot of empathy and feeling towards their partner. So, empathy and emotional behavior or emotional intelligence is wired in our system, in our neural system, right? And empathy and emotional behavior is also uh, very, you can say, very much related to something that we call in psychology is pro-social behavior and mindfulness. But mindfulness is something that I'll talk about a little later. Let's look at pro-social behavior first. Okay, when pro-social behavior basically means the ability to stand up and help others, the ability to be proactive in doing something for others which they need, the ability, if we can put it this way, the ability to have a sense of social welfare, the ability to be altruistic. Okay. And there's ample research in psychology to prove this. For example, the term pro-social behavior originated, in America in the early 1900s, right? You can say when a particular woman called Kitty Genovese, okay, in New York was killed, and she was stabbed. She was walking, towards her apartment building, okay, when she was stabbed, okay, more than 30 times, okay, by the killer. And she screamed and shouted for help. But people, New York, as we know, is a concrete jungle. It is made up of many, many buildings, okay, skyscrapers. Okay, so there were people who were living in the other buildings. They heard her screams, but nobody came out to help. So the term pro-social behavior actually was coined post this notorious incident and very unfortunate incident in America. And the term that was used was, many people who heard her screaming were interviewed, okay, by the reporters, by psychologists, by the police personnel. And they said that we all thought there were two reasons. We were scared. And two, we all thought that the other person, somebody else is going to go out and help, which did not happen. And so, unfortunately, Kitty Genovese lost her life. So, when we talk about being emotionally intelligent, when we talk about empathy, we talk about people who engage in pro social behavior. That is, people who would have actually gone out and helped her, people who would have saved her life, right? And here are some of the strategies for being empathetic or for developing our emotional intelligence. Okay. The first is obviously a kind of self awareness, the way in which we name our emotions, so to say, the way in which we understand our emotions. Okay. One of the basic steps in this is we should learn to accept the emotion that we are feeling. Right? This is what is we say for empathy, for developing EQ. Okay, many people do not understand this. Many people cannot uh, pinpoint and label the emotion that they're experiencing. Many people, for example, a simple thing, okay, somebody who's senior to you, okay, in your work environment, in your academic environment, shouts at you. Okay, there are many ways of dealing with this. Some would just stand quietly, okay, and listen to the person shouting. Some people would stand, listen to the person shouting, and apologize. Some people would start weeping, okay, the anxious type. They would get upset, they would weep. Yet others would argue that they are not wrong. Okay. Some, okay, might get very angry. But again, there are ways of behaving in anger. Some might get angry, seethe with anger, okay, clench their fists but be quiet. While others might be so angry that they might react, they might shout, they might argue, they might abuse. So, one situation, multiple responses, right? All these responses can be understood if we tend to understand our behavior pattern, if we tend to understand what we're experiencing, if we tend to become aware of what we're experiencing, our emotion, if we tend to understand what makes us angry, what irritates us, why do we behave the way we behave. Okay. And a very good way of dealing with this is something which is recommended often by psychologists is keeping a diary, keeping a journal. Okay. You can need not have a physical diary or journal. It can even be digital, right? You can type on your phones, you can type on your tablets, right? Right? But knowing and understanding why we are experiencing that pattern. Because after all, our emotional responses, our emotional intelligence only develops when we understand our patterns, when we understand what irritates us, when we understand what makes us happy, when we understand what is it that we are really scared of. Many a times people take lifetimes to understand this. Okay. They might take years and years. Still others do not understand it. Okay. But a conscious effort can be made. A conscious effort towards self-awareness can actually be made. For example, how many of us are scared? Most of us, right? Are scared of something or the other. Okay. It might be a small thing, it might be a big thing. Okay. It might be real, it might be imaginative. It can be anything for that matter. But we are scared, right? Understanding and writing that down, what scares us. Some people are scared of animals. Some people are scared of ghosts. Some people are scared of losing their loved ones. What is it that scares you, right? So awareness or naming our emotions becomes extremely important. engaging with them, not just denying them, not saying that, I don't feel this. Okay. Very often, I'm sure, as youngsters, as people, we've heard this statement. If we are upset and somebody comes and talks to us and says, what's the matter? How many of us have heard this statement? Nothing is wrong. I am fine. When you hear people make statements like this, I am fine, nothing is wrong, then obviously there is something wrong. Otherwise, you would not say the opposite. So, understanding, we might share it with others, we might not. But understanding why we are not fine becomes very important. The second aspect for developing emotional intelligence is emotional hearing, so to say. And emotional hearing does not mean, that when we're talking to people or when we're listening to other people, okay, when we're listening to their problems, we actually become emotional. No. Emotional hearing means being perceptive of their emotions. Many times people will say things, but they might do the opposite. Many times people will say something, but their actions do not match their words. Right? Emotional hearing means understanding what the other person is feeling, irrespective of what they're saying and what they're doing. That is being emotionally intelligent. That is being empathetic. Okay. And we can practice this with everybody. We can practice it starting from today. We can practice it with our family. We can practice it with our friends, the people you will meet at your new campus. Okay. Fine. They might be your juniors, they might be your seniors, they might be your peers, they might be whoever. You can practice it with whoever. Okay. You can practice it with people, not just your peer group, but you can practice it with uh, others. For example, you can practice it with your teachers. Why they're saying what they're saying? If they're scolding you, if they're shouting at you, okay, why is it? What is behind that? Okay, you can practice it with others that you might find in your campus. For example, how many of us actually pay attention to the class 4 employees in the campus, the people who help us, the technicians, the non-teaching staff? They are human beings, right? They have families, they have emotions. How many of us actually pay attention to them? If we learn to develop our emotional hearing, we learn to understand why people feel the way they feel. And these are not big strategies, they are very, very simple, small tips that you can use in your everyday working, in your everyday professional life or academic life. Automatically, what would this translate into? This would translate into the fact that if you're perceptive, okay, if you respond pleasantly to others, if you understand what they're feeling, okay, people will remember you for the way you make them feel. People would remember you for the kind of person you are, right? The next is obviously having the motivation to empathize. We need to be motivated to have some kind of emotional intelligence. And I cannot exaggerate much, or I cannot emphasize much the importance of EQ in our lives, right? Because we might be great academically, but we feel we cannot understand our emotions, other people's emotions. Well, we are huge, very big failures in life, because life is not made up of just academics. Life is not made up of just work. Life is made up of people, and life is made up of our experiences with those people, and our emotions become very important there. Okay. Two more points is something that I'd like to emphasize over here. The first is something which we call as situation sensing. Okay. Situation sensing is when you walk into a particular room, okay, you should be able to, within the first few minutes, you should be able to gauge or understand what is actually happening in the room. You might not be able to pinpoint exactly what the conversation is. You might not be able to pinpoint and say, this is the entire context. This is what happened. This is what's going to happen. No, that's not required. Situation sensing just basically means something as simple as this. Is this environment positive? Is this environment negative? Is there something wrong here? Do I need to stay over here? Would it help if I step back? This is situation sensing. Okay. And this situation sensing is one of the most important features, you can say, that is developed by people who are emotionally intelligent, who are sensitive to their and other people's emotions. Why? Because you should be able to guess or gauge within a few moments what is actually required of you, right? How many of us, to give you one small example, okay, if there's a fight happening, a conflict, okay, like a physical fight, okay, an altercation happening, right? uh, how is it that people would respond? Some people would scream, some people would try to separate the people who are fighting, you know some people would actually get involved in the fight, okay. They would be they would get so hyper, they would get so emotional that they'd get involved in the fight, okay. Then there would be some others who would just be fence sitters. They just sit back and look at what's happening, okay. And there are some who would be like, yes, I knew this is going to happen, so let it happen, okay. So situation sensing is understanding what's happening in a particular situation. How can you contribute to it? Conflict is never good, right? So how can you contribute to reducing that conflict, reducing that aggression? And reduction always does not mean jumping into the fight and telling the people to stop fighting. Reduction can happen in, or decrease of conflict can happen in multiple ways, you know, right? So this is situation sensing. The next one that I wanted to talk about is something which is very tough for people, but yes, that is possible. And that is being open to feedback, feedback for your own self. Okay. We do not start with feedback for others. If you want to develop EQ, you start with feedback for yourself. Okay. You start with feedback for yourself. That means you should be willing to listen to what other people are saying about you. Listen to what they're saying. You might not agree, which is perfectly fine, right? We have our own emotional boundaries. We have our own ways of dealing with our emotions, right? But that does not mean that we cannot listen to what others are saying. Maybe something from what they're saying catches our ear. Maybe something appeals to us. Maybe we might feel, out of this entire thing, I can understand this one point. Out of this entire thing that was spoken, that was told to me, this is my personality and that is my personality, maybe this appeals, maybe I need to work on this. And feedback becomes extremely important in EQ. Why? Because often people, and this is a sign of people who do not have EQ, please remember, people who do not have EQ will not be able to and will not be willing to listen to feedback and criticism. Because only if you have EQ, only if you have the ability to deal with your own emotions, okay, only if you're emotionally stable, can you listen to criticism. Can you listen to how other people react to you? Not respond to you, how other people react to you. Some people will respond to you, but majority of people will react, right? So, developing feedback, or being open to feedback becomes very important. In all of these, I'd also like to mention another particular strategy, okay? And that particular strategy is something as simple as this, it is what we would call in psychology as emotion surveys. Emotion surveys means, you know, uh, this can be done by you, and this can be done by your peers, this can be done by teachers, this can be done in the workplace, right? By team leaders, okay? uh, you make a list of emotions, you make a list of commonly experienced feelings, okay? I do this, I react like this, I do this when this happens to me, I do this when I get angry, right? I do this when I am scared, etc, etc, right? Often when I am scared, I get very irritated. Whatever, a list of statements, you can say, okay, emotion based statements, right? And then share them and discuss them with others, what they experience, what you experience. Or keep that list with you, ponder over it, and think, what out of that applies to me, what does not apply to me, what can I work on, what can I not work on, okay? Something as simple as this: I have mood swings. Moods, okay, very common thing, right? That is, somebody is very angry, so you are in that particular mood, right? You might be upset, you might be stressed about something, okay? Your assignment's not been completed, You had a deadline to meet. You've not done that. Okay. Fine. Your peers have done better than you. You're jealous. Right. How would you react in those situations? Sorry, respond in those situations. Okay. So keeping a list of these kind of, emotion based statements helps. Okay. It helps to discuss, it helps to collaborate, it helps to just keep the list with us, to look at the list and to see what have I worked on. Okay. Right. Another strategy, so to say, of becoming emotionally intelligent, okay, is when we start focusing on our language, right? Now, I, for example, am a language person. My background is linguistics, right? So I deal with language. I deal with my researches on psychology. It's on gender, okay. Uh, but often, what I find is, okay, people who are emotionally intelligent, okay, people who are able to manage their emotions, are people who are good with language. Good with language does not mean having a command over the language. If I am proficient in English, if I'm proficient in Sanskrit, if I'm proficient in Spanish, okay, does not mean that I'm emotionally intelligent. When I say good with language means they know exactly when to respond and when to keep quiet. Something very simple, right? They might not have the right words. Some people do have the right words to say what to say, when to say, right? Some people are competent in communication, right? But yet others, something very simple and basic that we can all start with if we want to develop EQ, okay, is knowing when to keep quiet, knowing when not to speak, you know, knowing that this is not the right time, right? And knowing that yes, I can voice my opinions here. I am not per se talking about what you're saying. I am talking about just knowing this, when to open our mouths and when not to open our mouths, okay. That would save us a lot of hassle, because often conflicts and misunderstandings arise when, in the heat of the moment, in our emotional agitation, we tend to say things and later regret them. We tend to do things and later regret them. So being emotionally intelligent, if we are experiencing anger, for example, okay, or we are experiencing sadness, we need not burst out at the other person. Our anger, our sadness can be with us. Okay. We can go somewhere else. We can go for a walk. Okay. Go somewhere else, do something else, distract our minds. Okay. Fine. Play a game. Okay. Go out, engage in physical outdoor activity. Do something. Right. So, so the use of language, knowing when to use it, knowing when not to use it, becomes extremely important in practicing emotional intelligence. Now, I would move on to something which is called empathy. Okay. Mindfulness. Okay. And mindfulness here would mean, this particular point was already given in my slides, where I said that one of the ways of being empathetic, or being, practicing empathy, which is a core component of emotional intelligence, was being mindful, practicing mindfulness. And when we say mindfulness, what is it that we mean by mindfulness? We mean by mindfulness, if you look at the word mindful, okay, we mean by mindfulness being alert, paying attention. Okay, mindful, you're mindful of something. Simple meaning in English would be, you are paying attention to something. Okay, you're giving it attention. You're being conscious of it. Okay, so when we're mindful, or when we're practicing mindfulness, we are conscious. Conscious here does not mean living, because obviously we are living. So we're not talking about that. Consciousness here means, okay, being conscious of what is happening to us, being conscious of our environment, okay, being conscious of the people whom we are speaking to, whom we have to speak to, people whom we are interacting with, right? That is being mindful. And the term mindfulness, so to say, okay, the term mindfulness comes from, it was in America, it was it was introduced in America by psychologists, okay, as part of, stress reduction programs. Okay. Because we all understand, and you're all going on to become engineers, going on into your program. So you all understand that life will not be the same as your uh, family life. It is going to be hectic. There is going to be a lot of work. There will be competition. And when all this is going to be there, obviously there will be reasons for stress, reasons to, you know, be worried about something, reasons to panic. Okay, in the way we normally do when there's a lot of work, when we cannot complete it, when there are deadlines, right? When we want to excel, etc., etc. Okay. And so, mindfulness was brought to America as part of stress reduction programs, right? But mindfulness, actually, if you see, has its origin in Eastern philosophy. Okay, the Buddhist, Jain, Hindu religions, so to say. Okay, and mindfulness is one of the components, you can say, of being in a meditative state. Okay, but it is not akin to meditation. A lot of times we've heard this, it's become, meditation has now become a catchword. Okay, people want to meditate, they want to understand what is meditation, etc., etc. So mindfulness is not being in a mindfulness is not akin to meditation. But yes, it can be a component, it can be a core component of developing a meditative state. Okay, right? But for our understanding, we are not going to get into that. For our everyday understanding, we would look at mindfulness as a psychological, okay, a conscious activity, something that would excel us to work, something that would, if not magically vanish the stress away, it would help us to reduce the stress, something that would help us to understand and deal with our environment. So mindfulness just means a kind of, you can say, consciousness, okay, uh, towards the internal and the external environment. And one of the most important things in mindfulness is the ability to concentrate, right? So this is something that I'd like to discuss with all of you. That is, let's look at it this way. When I say you have the ability to concentrate, okay, you would have heard of terms like this, terms like multitasking. People are very good at multitasking. People are very good at, completing many things at together, many things at one time, right? What is happening there? Multitasking is quite valued, okay, in the Western world, and now so also often in, in our own culture, India. But what is, when we say that you are multitasking, okay, let's say you are, finishing your assignment, your work that's assigned to you, and you have your headphones on and you're listening to music, okay, fine. You're exercising and you're listening to music, okay. So you're multitasking, you're doing two things, three things at the same time, okay. The question arises, are you able to do justice to all those two things, three things that you're doing? The answer is no. Why? Because you're not focusing on either of them completely. That's the reason. So if you're not able to focus, on, let's say, if we are writing our assignment and we're listening to music, neither are we able to completely focus on the writing, nor are we able to completely focus on the music. We might turn around and say, oh, this is a song, or these are songs that I really like. And so, I know the lyrics, I am focusing on the lyrics. It's there in the background, right? Wouldn't it be better if you finish the assignment and then listen to the music? Because that way you'd give your wholehearted attention to the music and you would give wholehearted attention to the assignment. So, one of the first steps in becoming mindful is to develop concentration. And concentration comes from one-pointed attention. One-pointed attention, right? One-pointed attention would mean focusing on one task at a time. The more we focus on one task, one thing at a time, the better we are able to concentrate. The better we are able to concentrate, the faster it finishes. The faster it finishes, the more time we have at hand to do other things. So it works very simply. Mindfulness helps us to finish our work faster. Mindfulness, by and large, helps us to keep stress at bay. Okay, right? It doesn't keep us distracted, right? Another way of looking at this would be, another simple way of looking at this would be, if you're in the habit of, again, to take that example, you're in the habit of, doing two things, three things at the same time, right? It would become a lifestyle practice. It would become a lifestyle habit, a pattern, right? And often there are situations where you're required to not be distracted. Let's say in your examinations, okay, or some other particular task or activity that you're doing, okay, right? You're playing sports. Now, if there is a particular pattern that you've developed, it's become a lifestyle habit for you. Okay. As human beings, we not switch on and switch off, not electrical buttons, right? So automatically, if something is a lifestyle habit for you, you would continue doing that. It will spill over into other areas of your life. And that might not be very good. For example, you are in the habit of doing two things or three things at the same time. Somebody comes and talks to you and they need your help, right? But they're not very expressive. They're not demonstrative. They're hesitant. They will not say things very clearly, right? Because you have not developed one-pointed attention, because you've not developed mindfulness, you will not be able to sense the situation. You will not be able to understand what they need. You will not be able to figure out that, oh, I need to stop doing this and start focusing on this person. So many a times, we come across situations where our attention, okay, is required. We are required to be there in that situation. But because we've developed a habit of being distracted all the time, because we've developed a habit of doing two things, three things at the same time, we are not there. We are neither here, we are neither there. So actually, we are nowhere, right? So mindfulness begins with one-pointed attention. The term that we use for one-pointed attention is called, uh, if you would have heard of this term, okay, it's Sanskritized term called ekagrachit. Okay, one-pointed attention, wholehearted attention on something. Okay, so my practical nugget or advice to all of you would be to actually start practicing this. Okay? Because you never know when or where it might be required from you. When or where in life it might be needed, where there might be situations that you could have avoided, situations where you could have become successful, that you could have dealt with successfully, okay, but you could not, okay, because of your habit of being distracted or habit of thinking about too many things at the same time, okay, or feeling too many things at the same time, okay. That also is a kind of distraction. Having too many thoughts is a distraction, okay. Having too many emotions, experiencing too many emotions at one time is a distraction. Okay? Because if you're one-pointed, if you're mindful, you're just focusing on things as it is, calmly, right? The next thing about mindfulness is, okay, something as simple as this. And that is, when we talk about being mindful, we talk about certain things that we can do to be mindful, right? There are these two, three small things that I can tell you about. Okay, again, practical suggestions. The first is something that we in literature call as defamiliarization. Defamiliarization. Okay, right. Uh, Defamiliarization is a term that's been used, in literary theories, early literary theories. Okay, especially started by the Russian formalists, right? And formalists, like writers I can mention, like Victor Shklovsky. Okay, and defamiliarization basically means this, that the writer tends to write about an incident, tends to write about an object, tends to write about anything which is very mundane, okay, very commonplace, but writes in such a way that the reader is able to focus on, the reader is able to focus on that particular thing. The reader gets fascinated with that. Okay, the reader gets fascinated with what's written. So, for example, the writer writes on, let's say, a stone, a small rock, a stone, a tree, things that we encounter in everyday lives, right? How many of us actually pay attention to that? Okay, trees are all around us. Okay, we might, as children, we would have played with stones or pebbles or whatever. Okay, how many of us pay attention to that now? We don't. Okay, so if a writer is able to write about something so common and yet able to make the reader pay attention to that, that is defamiliarization. Writing about something in such a way that you experience it as a totally new thing. If not a totally new thing, then you experience it in a new way. You're forced to pay attention. You're forced to pause. You're forced to pay attention and see, oh, this is the way it is. I've never thought about this, right? So when we're mindful, one of the ways of practicing mindfulness is, something, let's say, we take up objects, okay? We take up particular situations in our life. You can start off with objects. You need not start off with situations and people. Though, yes, it can include people and situations. Uh, and you think about it new ways. Give a few minutes, just a few minutes, okay? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, that's it. Just think about it. Let's say you think about your favorite film. You think about your favorite song, your favorite game, okay? You think about something as simple as this, okay? As simple as the road that you're walking on, okay? You think about it in a new way. Just focus on it. Just look at it. Some thought will cross your mind, okay? It might be a pleasant thought, it might be an unpleasant thought, okay? It might be positive, it might be negative. Something will cross your mind, okay? Normally, if you're mindful, let's say you think about something you like eating, okay? Right? All of us are fond of particular foods, okay? Some of us are fond of fried food, some of us are fond of salty food, some of us are fond of sweets, okay? So let's say you think about something that you're very fond of. Think about it for 5 minutes. Nice. One of the most important things that's going to happen to you is if you think about food, your mouth's go to water. But move beyond it. Yes, you will start thinking about food and you will start thinking that you want to eat it. But think about it in the sense that I've never looked at it this way. Okay. I've never thought of it this way. This can also be a situation. Okay. So thinking about people, thinking about situations from objects to food items, okay, to actual people in your life. Okay. When you start rethinking, when you start looking at things in a new perspective, you're being mindful. You're focusing on them for a few seconds. Another practical way of being mindful, okay, is sometimes when this is when we're very stressed out, right? When you have a lot of work to do, which I'm sure you will in the days to come, in your course and in your programs, right? This happens when you can do it when you're very stressed out, when you're very tired, okay? You still have work to finish. You can lie down, right? Lie down in a particular place, sit in a particular place calmly, okay? And focus on your body. Focus on your body, it means what? We normally, it's in mindfulness we call it body scanning, okay? Fine. But body scanning can be done in multiple ways. You can lie down in, or you can just sit, okay? And focusing on the body starts off with from your toes, from your toes, okay? When you focus on the body means you concentrate your inner vision, your energy, okay, on that part of the body, okay? So you start off with your left, let's say, your toes of the left, right foot, then toes of the left foot, then the right foot, then the left foot, okay? Then your ankle, then your shin, okay? Then your thigh, okay? Then your then your abdomen, okay, and things like that. So you focus on your body. From the bottom, you're moving up till you come to the head, the forehead. Okay. You can spend just 5 minutes doing that. Okay. That itself, just a simple body scan would recharge you. Okay. It will not keep you so tired. It's a small action. Okay. Another thing for being mindful, many a times, a small tip which is taught in Hatha Yoga, the asanas, okay, is something where you lie down and do this. You need not sit, you can lie down and focus on your body, okay, on different parts of your body, right? Another action that is often taught is this one's very simple and very, very effective. Any emotion that you're experiencing, pause, just take 3 to 4 deep breaths. That's it. Just pause and take 3 to 4 deep breaths. That's it. Nothing more. Okay. You will breathe, deep breath means you fill in your chest with air. Okay. Inhale, and then you exhale completely. Okay. Fine. So any kind of a stressful situation, you can pause and repeat this. Do this 3-4 times, take 3-4 deep breaths, then pause. Okay, then do it again for 3-4 times. Okay. It's very helpful for people who get anxious, very helpful for people who get scared. Okay. Also helpful for people who get angry, right? Because again, this is something that comes from, like I mentioned, Eastern philosophy. Okay. The Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. It comes from, different strands, different traditions of these. Okay. They're meditative practices that you should practice pausing, practice the pause. Okay. Like you can focus on your breath, take a few deep breaths, you can focus on pausing. Especially helpful for people who get very angry, who are prone to anger, right? It'll help you to become mindful, even for a few seconds. Please remember, mindfulness is not meditation. Mindfulness is just being aware. If you're aware, you will be able to emote better. You will be able to understand the situation better. Obviously, you'll be able to deal with it, right? Even if it is an unpleasant situation, you will be able to deal with it. So you practice the pause, okay? You can engage in body scanning, right? Also, apart from this, something as simple as this, okay? We understand everything through our senses, right? We understand everything through our senses. We have 5 senses, right? The sense of touch, the sense of smell, taste, right? The sense of vision, and the sense of hearing, right? Being mindful means engaging in how we understand and look at the world through these senses. So, for example, I'll give you a very simple example for this. Okay. If you have seen rains, downpour, okay, fine, you would have seen the difference between, a rainy day and a sunny day, right? Often when we talk about a rainy day and a sunny day, we, as individuals, as humans, talk about weather. Today it's very hot, today it's very sultry, it's very windy, etc., etc. How many of us, after saying this, actually pay attention to the weather? Look up at the sky, look up at the tree, just look around. We don't, right? Most of us don't. We make this statement and then we go on with whatever we're doing, go on with the conversation, go on with the task that is at hand, etc., etc. So if we are focusing on our senses, let's say, if you are focusing on our senses, let's say you're focusing on the sense of vision, right? And it's a rainy day. You look at the rainy day, you will have an overcast sky. Okay, fine. You might have a sky that has dark gray clouds, right? And if anybody has seen flowers, don't you think that the color of the flowers becomes brighter against a overcast sky? The yellow, if a flower is yellow in color, if a particular flower is pink in color, okay, if it's red in color, don't you think that the redness of the flower, the yellowness of the flower becomes brighter against a gray sky as compared to a sunny sky? A sunny sky is throwing a lot of light on it, right? A gray sky is in the background, so the yellow of the flower, the brightness of the flower comes across. How many of us look at it like this? Okay. How many of us, when we eat our food, we just pay attention to the shape, the texture, the size of what we're eating, right? This is experiencing the world, being mindful of the world through our senses. How many of us, when we're listening to music, okay, something that all of us are fond of doing, how many of us, when we're listening to a favorite song, okay, get so immersed in the song that for a few seconds we forget what's around us, right? How many of us get so immersed in the tune that we forget what's around us? That's being mindful. But what do we do? Even if we are mindful of certain things, let's say somebody is involved in music, somebody who's interested in art, okay, somebody who's interested in writing, whatever, somebody who's interested in their, their digital software, right? We tend to do that when we're engaging in activities that we're fond of. Apart from that, we don't tend to do that. What I'm trying to tell you is, if you experience the world around you through the five senses, do it for things that you like. Also do it for things that you don't like. Things that you would have, or things that you would have not thought about. Okay. Right? Experiencing the world through hearing. Okay. Experiencing the world through touch. How many of us have actually gone to our grandparents and just held their hand tightly and paused and experienced that particular feeling, or the look in their eyes? Right? That is being mindful. Right? What would all this help us in? These activities for being mindful, they would help us to focus on, and this is a repeat, right? They would help us to focus on people. They would help us to focus on our own selves, calm us down. They would help us to maintain a kind of equilibrium, emotional equilibrium, a stable state. Because we can only be successful in whatever we are doing. We can only be successful in being with people if we are stable and calm. If you're agitated, okay, a term that I had used earlier, whirlpool of emotions, right? When I was talking about EQ in the beginning, if you're agitated, we're in a whirlpool. We can only work when the whirlpool subsides. We can only work when the whirlpool becomes calm and quiet, right? Something which in yoga, okay, fine, is if you look at the sutras of Patanjali, okay, who's supposed to be the grandfather of yoga, right? You will come across this term, which is very commonly used. It's called Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is, you have to stop the whirlpool. You have to stop the agitation. So being mindful would help you to deal with emotions. And obviously, if you're mindful and you're dealing with your emotions, you are going to be a sure shot success in whatever you're doing. And when I say success, I do not mean success purely in worldly terms. Obviously, you will be a success in worldly terms. Okay. You would be better at your work. You'd be better in your classes. Okay. You'd be better at interaction. But I just mean success. You would be a success in life. Right? You would not be bogged down by stress. You would not be bogged down by life situations. Right? You would not be, you would not face life like, oh God, what is happening to me? Like, why is this happening to me? With a lot of abuses. That's not going to happen. Okay. You would be able to face it to the best of your ability, whatever be the situation. Okay. Every time, material success is not guaranteed to us in our life, right? In all the experiences that we have in life. But yes, every time we can choose to be successful in the way we respond. So when I say being a success, you can be successful materially with name, fame, but you will also be a success personally for your own self and for the people around you, right? And we should learn to practice, mindfulness. We should learn to practice emotional intelligence. Why? Because after all, in our everyday existence, okay, we interaction is made up of people. Interaction is made up of people's emotions, people's thinking, okay, and our own thinking and our own emotions. So if we are able to practice that, if we are able to deal with this, we are able to recognize what we're feeling, what others are feeling. If you're able to be mindful of our own feelings, we will know what to say, when to say, right? We would know what, okay? We would be able to answer these questions. Again, in mindfulness, a very simple practice that we have is answering questions. What, where, how did this happen? When did this happen? Why did I do this? Answering these questions to yourself. It's a way of self-exploration. It's a way of self-analysis. Okay. And you do not need hours to do it. Okay. You're walking down the road, do it for 5 minutes, do it for 10 minutes in a day. That can be spared surely from a 24-hour schedule. 5 minutes, 10 minutes can be. If you bring this into practice, it will become a habit. Like multitasking is a habit. Mindfulness and EQ can become habits. And they can become very healthy habits and very healthy lifestyle choices for all of us, right? So I would end this lecture, right, by saying something like this. Like I mentioned earlier, charity begins at home. And so to be people who can be very caring, who can be very loving, we need to first start taking care of our own selves, because like we have a proverb that says this: you cannot pour from an empty cup. Empty cup means you. If you are not emotionally stable, if you're not mindful, okay, if you're not mindful of your emotions, your thoughts, you cannot help others. You cannot help yourselves. So help yourselves to help others, to create a healthy environment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for the mindful keynotes highlighting the importance of emotional intelligence with reference to interpersonal communication. That was an amazing session. Now, I appreciate queries from the students and faculty to be posted in the chat box, if any. Oh. I'm waiting. Yeah. Fine, ma'am. There don't seem to be any queries. So now
right.
it is time. I proposed a vote of thanks.
Okay.
I sincerely thank our resource person, Ms. Saumya Sharma, for her indelible and informative session. I hope and I'm sure our students have imbibed a lot, many techniques and strategies to be successful. I thank the management of VJIT for encouraging us to steer this session, our guide, HOD Professor Rajendra Prasad, and my dear colleagues without whom the program wouldn't have been successful. Above all, I thank all the students for their presence and making this session a grand success. Please note that the topic for tomorrow's session focuses on building self-confidence by Mr. Gampa Nageshwarao, who is a famous motivational speaker. Please follow him live at 10:30 a.m. on the same channel. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Okay, madam. The session end for the day.